If you're a dog lover, stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with Shelley Fraser Mickle about Itching to Love, the story of a dog. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Shelley Fraser Mickle is an award-winning author of over a dozen books for adults and children. She was also a storyteller on NPR's Morning Edition from 2000 to 2006. And she joins us to talk about Itching to Love, the story of a dog. Shelley, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Well, thank you, Dan. I'm so happy to be here. I'm on a mission with this book, so let's go. Let's talk about it.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is many people may recognize your name and your voice from the time you were telling stories on NPR's Morning Edition. Tell us about how that came about.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, and so I had published a couple of novels. And I decided if I could tell a story in 3 minutes, I would become a better writer. So I called the University of Florida, where our NPR is recorded and broadcast from. And they gave me a chance. And they said, even though this Arkansas accent is slow, we'll give you a few more minutes to tell your stories. So I did that for like 15 years. And one day, National Public Radio called me and they said, we hear you're funny. And we need funny stuff on Morning Edition. Would you be a storyteller for us? So I did that for 6 years. It was great. It was wonderful. And yes, my accent and voice did start being recognized to the point where when I went to the grocery store, if I said anything, I could be recognized aisles away. So I had to comb my hair and take a bath before I went to the grocery store. And stop cursing in public. Not that I do. It would embarrass my grandmother, but it was an impetus to be careful in public. Thank you for asking. It's a funny kind of story. I will actually put this in there now as a warning because I was raised by a mother who thought every day she was on the I Love Lucy show. So I can't really do anything without seeing it comically. And when she sent me to the grocery store for a loaf of bread, I had to come home with a funny story for her. It wasn't the bread she needed, it was the story. She suffered from depression her whole life, and humor was her elixir. So I've been raised and more or less trained that way. And this book is my gift to all of us. I'm hoping that we can share stories and laughter together because it's so healing. I like to say that President Lincoln read Artemus Ward, a fictional character, every night before he went to bed to help him get through the horror of the Civil War. And Artemus Ward was a fictional character, but he believed that everyone should be happy and rich, even if you had to borrow money to do it. And Lincoln just thought that was a hoot. So we need to follow his direction and bring humor back into our everyday lives and share stories. Like this one, I'll tell you very quickly. I gave a talk to the Friends of the Library a couple of years ago about this very thing, humor and sharing little stories. And this woman came up to me afterward and she said, my mother is 100 years old and she lives in Alabama. She's Southern like you are, and she collects stories and humors. And so when she had her doctor's appointment, I called the next day and said, how did it go? And she said, it was awful, perfectly horrendous. He looked terrible. So the fact that the doctor looked worse than she did was a great humorous little aside. So I offer that often when I go to the grocery store and checking out to make someone happy and refocus their day on collecting humorous things. So in this book, Itching to Love, there are all kinds of research that prove what humor and laughter does for our bodies. Did you know that 20 seconds of laughter is equal in exercise to 3 minutes of rowing a boat? And then I studied Norman Cousins' book, The Biology of Hope, head first, and he wrote another book called The Anatomy of an Illness. And it's not that you can laugh your way out of cancer, But the research that he did at the California Medical School, which, by the way, was financed by Joan Kroc, and he was able to quantify, to study the effects of laughter on the body. And they found after World War II, when they had wards full of wounded soldiers, they had something called a laugh cart. I would like to think that Itching to Love would be in it today. And after the soldiers read something from that laugh cart, they needed fewer pain medication. So there's actually quantified effects of laughter on the body. Also, it's fun to know, if I can pronounce it correctly, that endorphins and enkephalins, which are peptides signaling the body to release pain-killing secretions, it's like morphine-like secretions, and the brain actually can signal over 30 of these chemicals to be released to help repair our bodies. You know, when physicians or medical students go to medical school, they go to learn to treat disease, but there's very little known about what the body can do to repair itself. And some of that is in this book, Itching to Love. But I want to talk about it more, because actually this book came from a little vignette I did on public radio, telling the story about this dog that came into my life. He was a Florida brown dog named Buddy, and he was my neighbor's dog. He wasn't even mine. And here in north central Florida, we have enough undeveloped land that dogs can spoon in the woods unchaperoned. So we have a lot of dogs that you can't name the breed, but Florida brown dogs are frequently mostly bulldogs. And Buddy, I'll paint his portrait here in words. That's another thing about this book. I want people to get back to loving words and read these little chapters aloud, maybe at the dinner table over a difficult conversation. So anyway, Buddy, his portrait was, his head was as big as a gallon pickle jar, and he had yellow snake eyes. He was absolutely scary looking. He weighed about 120 pounds, and he had polka dot front paws like a speckled bird dog had dived in the gene pool. So he decided to own me. And this book is dedicated to all the mothers in the world, because it's about that time when your children grow up and move out. What do you fill that hole with? You've got so many mothering skills left, and that's part of the comedy of this. So anyway, Buddy was my neighbor's dog, and I'm married to a pediatric brain surgeon. And he's so perfect, but he wasn't home much. And when he was so tired I could boss him around. So I decided after my kids left that I would pull up that old dream of my childhood of being a cowgirl. So I built a whole farm. And I had 2 horses named Skip and Robert Redford. And you can guess which one was the Palomino. So I was in the barn one day tacking up my horse, and Buddy dug out from his fence when his owner went to work, and he was skulking around watching me, and he ran in the barn and stole my galloping boot, which I put on my horse for protection on the road. So anyway, those boots cost me nearly $70, so I immediately chased Buddy home. And his owner always left the garage door open like a foot so Buddy could get out of the rain or whatever. So I pushed it all the way up, and there Buddy sat with the galloping boot in his mouth. And I told him to spit it out, and he did reluctantly. And then I saw beside his feed bowl a lot of my things that he was hoarding and had stolen, like a shirt I'd left in the barn, a towel with my sweat on it, a water bottle, my comb. Now, this sounds funny, but it's true. In my long life of over 80 years, I've had some really weird boyfriends. but I've never had the obsessive adoration that Buddy was offering me. So what did I do about that? Next thing that happened was his owner called, who'd been recently divorced, and he said, Shelley, I got married last weekend, and my new wife has a dog that Buddy immediately beat up. So will you take Buddy? So of course I had to take him, and I wanted him anyway. And in this book, you will see when you get it, there are 3 pictures of Buddy that I found, and he's always staring at my face. So I needed to know why he chose me. So this whole book is like a journey through philosophy of how do we want to connect with even across species? What makes us choosable? It's about relationships of any kind from anywhere. So you'll have a great journey. And I always said when I talked about this book, I won't give away the end of where I arrived to answer what did Buddy see in me that I didn't see in myself. But I'm going to go ahead and give it away because the value of this book is really the journey of how I got there. And I always said, if I tell you the secret that I found, I'll have to, in Godfather talk, I'll have to kill you. But again, the fact of this book is the journey and the fun of it. So science has told us since the year of 2000, when they started doing really serious research on canines' brains, that dogs have a different vision than we do. They have fewer photoreceptors in their retina. And also their eyes let in more light than ours do. And that's why they frequently, their eyes are glowing in photographs, pictures that we take of them. But they can't see anything right in front of them clearly. But that's one reason they can hunt at night. They can see in the dark. So their eyes are very different from ours. But in these photographs of Buddy in this book, you will see how he's staring at my face always. So it turns out that dogs can read our emotions. They're probably the most emotionally intelligent creatures on our earth. And Buddy was seeing that I missed my children. And he had to have someone to guard. He was mostly bulldog, and he was hardwired to guard someone. So we were a perfect match. I was the center of his life, and I needed to be the center of someone's life. So he cured my emptiness syndrome, if it's ever cured for a woman. In fact, today I know I have a friend who bakes cookies for her dog and brushes his teeth before he goes to bed. So a lot of us get dogs after our children are gone. In fact, there's a new statistic out that 1 in 5 people got dogs during the pandemic. And now we have like 95% of those dog owners are new. And I'm really going to be interested to follow this to see how that relationship changes them. Because dogs soften our voices. They make us practice affection. And you have to also be their leader. To make them feel secure, they have to feel like you're in charge.
This book is a memoir, and you use the story of Buddy to tell the story of your life. So we learn about your childhood, we learn about all these things that happened to you and how you approach them with humor, which is how it's allowed you to get through the many challenges of your own life.
Right, yeah. I'm really big on that, and I can go back to a moment in my career. I've been writing for 50 years, and I was desperate to be a novelist. It's a calling. You can't deny that passion. And so I was writing for many years, and I happened upon this wonderful editor, Louis Rubin, the most famous editor since Maxwell Perkins, who edited Hemingway and Marjorie Rollins and Fitzgerald. And Louis said, when he read my 600-page manuscript, he said, some of this is the most god-awful stuff I've ever read. And some of it is so funny I can't stop laughing. So here's a check for $300. And if you will work with me, we might come up with something publishable. So over the 3 years that I worked with this wonderful man who was a revered scholar in literature, he died in 2013. He finally told me, he said, your greatest strength is writing comedy and humor. And he was a big fan of Mark Twain. And he said, that's your talent. So when I found this little piece of Buddy that I had read on the radio, soon after the pandemic, I said, all of us are suffering with our mental health and anxiety and all of that. And I read that little 3-minute piece and I said, this is pretty funny. I wonder if I can do more with it. So I started writing around it. And before I knew, I had 100 pages of my memoir, my whole life around this decade I spent with this dog, and how he taught me something I didn't know before. He brought out things in me that I had never experienced or expressed. And that was a lot of love and learning of a new form of empathy. But humor can save us all. Mark Twain said humor is the saving thing. When it pops up, it smooths out all our hardnesses, and our grievances and irritations fly away. So that's basically what I want this book to do. So I appreciate you letting me go on and talk about it.
Now, unlike other memoirs, your memoir has recipes at the end.
That is funny. My publisher at the last minute said, since this is a lot about women, and why don't you add Southern recipes? And I said, well, I hate to cook. But here's the funny aside on that. When I married my husband, who's perfect, he was training as a pediatric neurosurgeon at Harvard. And my mother said, if you don't cook for him every night, you're going to hell. So I had to learn to cook. And I did. And so I'm pretty good at it now. But when my publisher asked me for real recipes, I can't color between the lines. So I made up some really loopy recipes. So if you don't think the book is funny, go to the back and read the recipes, and I'm almost going to guarantee you're going to get a laugh.
The book is Itching to Love, The Story of a Dog by Shelley Fraser Mickle. Shelley, thank you for talking with me today.
Well, thank you. And let me give you my website, because I really want to hear from readers when they get the book. It's shelleymickle.com, SHELLEY and MICKLE.com. I'm loving to hear from you. I really want to know if you laugh reading the book and if you want to share it with someone. Thank you for having me. This has been great fun.
If you'd like to purchase Itching to Love, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.